That's about all we need to do for the bed. And now we're going to remove these side extrusions so we can continue building the frame. For the bed, we're going to add the heated bed and do all the electronics and stuff later. There's no reason to keep that weight when you're building, so it's best to leave it off. Okay, these steps are starting on page 52 of the manual, and we're simply going to come around and begin removing the sides here with through the blind access. We'll do this side as well. Now I will be preloading some square nuts. I'm going to put 2 in the top here. That's always helpful to orient, similar to how the manual has it. So I've turned it around and I've loaded up here in the top left and the back. Now I also need to put 1 M3 nut in here, in the back slot here. Okay, I've now got that one in there. And last but not least for this step, I need to do 2 M3 nuts in this channel down here. Okay, and I've now got the 2 preloaded M3 nuts here, here, and here. And we're also going to need to flip this over so it's upside down, and we're going to need to put the M3 nuts here in the bottom channel. And you're going to need 2. And you can see I've got those 2 loaded now. So on page 54, we find the next steps, which is going to be attaching the rails as well as the bottom pieces, extrusion, and they're going to be attached on the sides here. So one of the challenges with this is that there's a little bit of an offset. I'm going to show you how I do it to tighten these down and get them set up properly. So I'm going to go ahead and flip this and just be a little careful because the bed's going to flip around with it. And then I'm going to take my rail. I'm really doing this upside down. I'm going to slide it back until I have access. And I'm going to carefully hold down this extrusion here. And I'm going to make sure that this is right where it needs to be. So you got to look for the hole and kind of line it up with the screw. And it should be pretty close to the end of the rail if you have your spacing right. So then I'm going to go ahead and find that screw through my blind hole access. And then I'm just going to simply snug it up. And it should tighten up just right where it needs to be. Make sure there's no bounce here. And then I'm just going to repeat and do the other side just like that. Okay, I went ahead and tightened up both sides. Now, if they're like if yours are like mine, they're going to be a little floppy at first, and that's fine. Try to get them as tight as you can, but there is going to be a little bit of wiggle in them until you get everything kind of bolted up. Okay, so I went ahead and tightened this one up a little bit. So you shouldn't be able to move them super easily, but they are going to probably move if you bump them or accidentally put pressure on them. But we are going to be squaring this up as we go, and once we add more pieces, it'll get easier and easier. Okay, now that I've got the top pieces on, I'm just going to do the same thing, but use the E extrusions for the bottom. And these are just like the last ones, we're going to slide them right in and tighten them up through the blind hole access that you can see right here. Okay, for these, I've lined them up, and I'm carefully holding this down so it doesn't all tip over. And these you can really hold down on your surface, and you should be able to tighten them a little more. Unfortunately, it's kind of hard to do at this angle with the camera. But I've got that one in pretty tight, so now I'm just gonna rotate it around and do the other one the same way. And it should just slide into place where it needs to be. And don't be afraid to give it a little extra torque. Just be careful not to strip the screw head. Something else you can do once you're done is set it on its back like this and just go around. This will help square it up a little bit. Make sure all the extrusions are resting flat, and then just give it a little bit of torque and tighten up each one of these. It'll help make sure that it's not leaning funny. And I'm going to insert some M310s in these back extrusions. The reason I like doing this way is because it's just going to help me put the brace on and secure it and square it up. So once I do this one, I'll put this on, then I'll flip it over and do the next one. So that's going to help me ensure that everything stays square. And then I'll do the screws for the M310s in the front after I get that done. Because right now, the way these extrusions are, they're going to want to move around and wiggle on you. So the best thing you can do is try to get that stiffened up before you do a whole lot more with it. So go ahead and take your M3x10s, use a little Permatex since it's metal on metal. And we'll go ahead and insert that in to each of these ends like such. So you're going to need your H extrusions for this part, and you're going to use the blind access, so you can go ahead and just slide these in. And once those are in, just go ahead and you should be able to tighten them up. And try to keep pressure on these joints as you tighten them. That's going to keep everything nice and locked in how you want it. Make sure there's no bounce. And now we're just going to flip this over. I'm going to do the same thing. Get those nice and tight. Keep the pressure on the corner. And now that's a lot stiffer than it was. And again, tap these extrusions. Make sure there's no bounce. If you're getting kind of a bounce when you tap them, I'm not, but I could kind of simulate one by just lifting it up like I was doing. So, but if they are bouncing around on you when you tap them, then something's out a little bit and you need to adjust it. Okay, now something else that you might want to check is the distance from here to here, as in the manual. So it should be about 37. And yep, there's the little 5 and the 2, so I'm right on the money on that. If you're not at 37, you might have an issue with where you cut your holes, your blind holes, so that's probably going to be a bigger issue, but it's always good to check and get the warm fuzzy. And now is also a good time to put your M3x10s in these front pieces, so I'll go ahead and do that. Or flip it over as needed. Alright, since I'm using the Kurigami bed and a V01 panel, I'm going to mount my cable chain on the how it was originally done in the 01, which is in the in the right here. I have the panel, as you can see here, from the 01, and the 02, you're supposed to mount it here, but I don't have a cutout there, so I'm going to use the original. Now, if you have a cutout, you may want to mount yours there. So I'll go ahead and mount mine here. To make it easier, I'll just go ahead and rotate this a little bit. Hopefully you can see that. So here's my target hole. Okay, and I'm going to mount mine with an M3x6 screw. The manual did say a 3x8, but that's a little bit too long for mine. So the 6 fits perfectly. And I'm just going to slide it back. And I got to loosen it a little bit. And slide it back in this corner. And that should be about right. And I can insert my bottom panel. Before we close this off with additional extrusions, we're going to need to preload a bunch of nuts. All right, here's the bottom right extrusion. And I went ahead and loaded 3 here in this channel and 4 on the very bottom channel. And I've got 4 here on the bottom left extrusion. And you're also going to need 3 on these top extrusions. Went ahead and preloaded those through the channels here. And the last step in the manual are these bottom 3 here on the bottom left side extrusion. And now I'm going to go ahead and preload 4 M3 nuts in the B extrusion. And this is going to go, once the deck is inserted, it'll go here in the front. Okay, now that I've got all the pre-nuts loaded, I'm going to slide my deck back into place. And now before you put this piece on, this is the piece that's going in the front on the bottom. Make sure that your 4 preloaded nuts are there, and make sure that that's facing the bottom. It should just slide right over. And you may have to get these screws a little tighter. Okay, that should be about right, because we're going to be, when we put these corners in, we're going to have to access from both sides. We're going to have blind access. We have to go like that on one side and like that on the other. Before you install this bar, because you're going to be closing everything off once we put those front extrusions in, just go around in the manual and double check that all your preloaded nuts are where they're expected to be. And this is, you want to check everything at this point. So I will go through the check. So I'm going to take out this deck panel. There's no reason to check it with that on. So I'm going to rotate it just like the manual has it to do the checks. So this will be my bottom piece that I'm going to put here, but I've taken off. So I need 4 here, which I have. I need 4 in these channels, which I have. And I need 2 here, and kind of in between these extrusions, but in this channel. Now I've rotated it, flipped it and rotated it to the top. So you should have 2 here. And it's probably a good idea just because the manual shows them in the center. I'm going to just kind of put them in the center. I don't know that it really matters yet. And then you also need to have 3 in this channel and 3 in this channel by the rails. Okay, now we're going to rotate on the left and do the checks here. So I should have, so here's the top, here's the bottom, and I should have 3 on this channel, which I do. And then I'm going to do the same thing. Flip over and check the right side. And I should have 3 on the bottom right, which I do. And you're also going to need these 2 here. Now something else, mine's, as I said, I'm going with a kind of a little bit of a Kirigami bed upgrade here. So there's one more spot that I want to check. I am going to put 2 M3 nuts here because I would actually like to mount my Z end stop up here, similar to how the Voron 0.1 has it mounted. And you also want to check for these 2 M3 nuts down here between your Z axes. And on the back of the printer, we've got 1 here. And if you're going to run Bowden, you need to have 5. If you're not, you need to have 3. I just left 5 in here for the flexibility on the left side. And then on the back right, you need to have 3 in this channel. And you also need to have 2 M3 nuts down here. And if you've got all those nuts in place, then you are good and you are ready to move on. Okay, now I'm going to keep on moving. So I need to find my D extrusions, and I'm also going to put this piece on. So now I'm going to put on the deck, since I've completed my pre-checks. Okay, we've dropped that in. Now remember, this has to go down. You want the 4 preloaded nuts going down here. And then you're just going to slide this in. And now we should be just about ready for those top-down extrusions. So these are the ones where they have the 2 hole, or the double holes on the bottom, and then just a single one on the top. So when you do these, make sure that your hole on the top, because you only have 1, is oriented properly, because you're going to need to access the blind for the screw. These down here need to access from the sides. So make sure you don't get that switched. So we'll go ahead and load that up. You might have to finagle it a little bit just to access it properly. It doesn't matter what order you do these in, but I'm going to go ahead and put them all on at once just to make sure I get it lined up properly. All right, now we're going to go ahead and sink the bottom 2 and then the top 2. And I'll go ahead and do this one first. Really doesn't matter what order you do them. Okay. I'm going to come back and tighten everything once I get it all initially in there. You do want a little play while you're getting everything initially tightened. So I just want it kind of finger tight. Okay, now we'll go ahead and snug that up. But not too tight yet, just leave it a little loose. I'm going to do the bottom. Okay, so the reason I'm doing it this way and just kind of getting it into place, it's easier to screw this way. So now I recommend laying it flat on its bottom, putting pressure by holding down your corners here and pressing down on here and holding this down. Loosen it up a little bit, retighten it, and then just tap it, and you should be good on that. We're going to do the same thing up here in a second. See, I don't know if you heard that, but it just dropped a little bit. That's what I wanted. So you want to make sure these are nice and square. And this is how you do it. Loosen it up a little bit, let it drop, and then get it nice and tight. We're going to do the same thing here. I'm going to flip this over. See my where my VHB stuff was. Some people wonder about VHB. It sticks really well, but I did get it off. All right, so same drill here. Just slightly loosen it. Put pressure down on this extrusion. So on this, getting the camera here. So hold this with your hand, pull it down, and then put pressure on the side extrusion as well that you're fastening to. That's gonna help make sure that's nice and square. And you only want to do it on these guys. So loosen it up a little bit and then put it back in, let it drop, put it in. Okay, now if we did it right, we flip it over. And we shouldn't have any bounce. So that's pretty good. And you can check all 4 corners like that. You should not have any bounce. If you do have bounce, it's real easy. You just loosen it up, drop it, and tighten it up, just like I showed. But these are all pretty good. So that's nice and square. If you're out of square, you will know it because your prints are going to possibly be off a little bit, and the motion might be off a little bit. So it's pretty easy to do. You also might feel bumps where these extrusions overlap, and you don't want to feel any bumps. They should be flush, assuming your extrusion is also flush. This is also why having a flat surface is so important. So this one I noticed a little bounce on, and I went ahead and loosened it, dropped it, put pressure, and then I retightened it. So just do that if you notice any kind of bounce at all. But I think I'm in pretty good shape now.